last month, the market value of the cryptocurrency Luna was $18 billion. But last week, Luna and a related currency, Terra, totally collapsed. One firm that had seen a $3 million Terra Luna investment skyrocket to $1.6 billion said that the investment is now worth just $2,400. The Terra and Luna crash caused a meltdown across the entire cryptocurrency market, causing Bitcoin prices to plummet and leading to a loss of some $300 billion across the entire crypto economy. So, anything interesting going on in your world? Really, Graham, I'll start with you. What is happening in your office in response to this?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, and thanks for having me here today. This, as you say, this conversation is very important and also a very timely one as well. So, for folks who don't know what the Treasury Department's been doing in this space for a little while now, we put out a report in the fall.
Excuse me,
yeah.
Let's not make presumptions like this. By the way, Bloomberg bureau chief. Hold on. Black Bloomberg bureau chief in Atlanta. We take this stuff for granted. We take this sort of progress for granted these days, but that's no small thing here in Atlanta, the moral capital of America. I don't want us to walk past or assume we know what this gentleman does. People hear these titles, of course you know. Again, female regulator for New York State.
Yes.
But Assistant Secretary for Financial Institutions at the U.S. Treasury Department there's no way to properly understand that title except to say it's like a 4-star general in the Army.
I'm going to tell everyone else at Treasury you said that.
Yes, well, please do.
Okay.
And that he regulates all who regulate. He's in charge of the entire financial institutional environment in the United States of America. The Assistant Secretary for Financial Institutions is in charge of all regulation writ large for financial institutions. For him to travel to Atlanta in the midst of all going on, because he and Wale, the Deputy Secretary, and the Secretary, Ms. Yellen, thought this was that important, and the administration, please, first of all, let's give them some appreciation.
Yeah.
Okay. And thank you very much. And Secretary, Comptroller Sue, your remarks were on point as usual. Thanks for your leadership. Sir.
So I appreciate that. Yeah. So as John said, the Secretary takes these issues very, very seriously. The Deputy Secretary takes them incredibly seriously, both for the potential that these products and services has to offer, particularly in terms of financial inclusion, easing people's access to payment systems, potentially more affordable financial services products. But we feel like the events of the past week have really highlighted, and I think this is the way that the panel is framed up, that there are a lot of risks out there, some of which we understand, some of which we don't understand particularly well. So we've been working really hard to try to understand how are people using these products, how do they want to use them, how can they use them safely and responsibly, and the way that we've been thinking about it is in terms of responsible innovation. We want people to be able to go out into the marketplace and try to give consumers and investors products and services that they want, that they can use in a safe and responsible way. So we did a little bit of work last year with all the agencies we're responsible for. There's an alphabet soup, there's the FDIC, there's the OCC, there's the Federal Reserve, there's the Securities and Exchange Commission.
CFPB.
There's the CFPB, yes. Consumer Financial Protection. So we've been working with those agencies to try to come up with a plan for how the administration is going to address these products and services so that we get the best of the opportunities without the worst of the risks that go along with it. What we said in the fall was that these kinds of stable coins like Terra that you're talking about, we think that there's a tried and true system in this country, which is the banking system that has a whole suite of protections for consumers. You know if you go into a bank, someone's going to make good if you want to pull your deposits out. If it's not the bank itself, the government stands behind all of that. These are well-regulated institutions. I want to stop here and say that banks are not perfect, They do not serve all communities. They do not serve all communities equally. This is a system that needs improvement, but we felt like that as a model, something that looks like that kind of financial institution ought to be the one that issues a stable coin, whether it's Terra, whether it's Tether, one of these other kinds of institutions. So that was our recommendation, was Congress needs to make sure that these kinds of products are issued by safe, sound, stable financial institutions. And we can get into the difference between the federal models and the state models. Some states are doing it well, some states are not doing it great. But that was our recommendation. The Secretary feels like the events of the past week have sort of underscored that people need to be able to rely on these products and services, know if they want to cash out their Terra or cash out some other kind of coin, that money, their money will actually be there. You know, some of this has to do with risks to the institutions themselves and the broader economy if these products are used broadly and they start to go badly. But this is fundamentally about the people that are putting their money into these things, because big, sophisticated investors are going to be able to pull their money the fastest at the hint of the biggest problem. It's the ordinary folks that don't have connections that are going to be left holding the bag when all the money starts to go out and their investments go down. So we have called on Congress to pass legislation to bring a little bit more structure around this marketplace to capture that responsible innovation. But we're also working with our counterparts, the acting controller, others in the federal government, on what do we do in the meantime before that happens, because Congress is slow, to really protect consumers and investors in this space. So it's a lot of work, and we're very focused on it.
Yeah, you're right. Not everyone, people were crushed last week, but not everyone has been crushed here. There are those who got out early and did very well. What about the regulatory environment? Why should, Adrian, why should investors feel safe investing in cryptocurrency?
Well, first let me say, so I am the first person of color in my role, the first woman of color in my role, first Black American in my role. And as you can imagine, New York State, when it comes to state regulators, right, we're a little bit different than everybody else. We regulate 80 foreign banks. 17 of the 30 globally systemic banks we oversee every day. Thousands of insurance companies are our regulated entities, including AIG and MetLife. Cryptocurrencies, student loan servicers, mortgage servicers, debt collectors are all things that we regulate in New York State, and we really are the only prudential regulator right now overseeing crypto. We've been at it for a long time, and we do a lot of work with the OCC, with Treasury, with the SEC, with foreign regulators. Just last month, I had foreign regulators from about 5 different countries in our office talking about crypto. And all the things that they're talking about on the federal level and starting to do on the federal level when we talk about bank-like regulation are things we've been doing at the department for many years. So we have cybersecurity regulations, the same ones that apply to the banks apply to the crypto companies we regulate. The same anti-money laundering protections that apply to the banks apply to the cryptocurrency companies we regulate. When it comes to stablecoin, we have very conservative reserving. We think about runs and the losses. So if you're licensed in New York State, you have to carry cash or cash equivalents on a one-to-one basis with any token that's on chain. We have third-party attestations. So a third party, an independent third party, has to come in and attest to the reserving that our crypto companies have when it comes to stablecoin. And I think, like Graham said, there's always room for improvement. There's lots of institutions that don't serve many, many communities well. And so as a regulator, it really is our responsibility collectively working together with the federal government, working with international regulators to make sure that this innovation is developing responsibly. And this is a fast-moving space, and we're all learning about it together. We're all collaborating and coordinating to make sure that we can keep abreast of the trends and that consumers and institutions are protected from some of the dangers.
Yes. Hey, Michael, Adrian mentioned the banks. How much are banks thinking about crypto right now? And what exactly are they thinking about?
So there's a range. I think prior to the most recent events, I think there were a number of banks who were basically, I think, trying to respond to customer demand. If you talk to bank CEOs, bankers, maybe 2 or 3 years ago about crypto, by and large, almost all of them said, we're not interested. It was too new, too many risks, too many unknowns, lots of BSA and all issues. But I think in the last year or so, interest has increased in part because there's been a lot of clients who've come to the banks and said, I'd like to do this through you because I trust you, I know you, you have my money. And so I think that that has put some pressure on banks to get in some way, shape, or form. And there's been a range. I think some have been quite cautious, appropriately cautious, and some others have been less cautious. And so what we've tried to do is ensure that everybody's kind of taking a similar, safe, sound, fair approach. And I try to work really hard to connect with folks, colleagues like Adrian, Graham, others, to prevent any kind of race to the bottom. Because it is anytime you have this much money chasing returns and that kind of thing, risk discipline can erode. And it's not hard for a bank to be aggressive, which leads other banks to say, well, those guys down the street are doing it, how come I can't do it too? I think the events of the past week, part of the reason I just want to put a fine point on the wake-up call is that I think it is going to force a lot of folks to rethink and say, is this really for us? What is our risk appetite? What if we had those kinds of activities and exposures, how would we have dealt with this? I think it's a real sobering moment.
Can we expect the big banks to issue their own stable coins?
I don't think, in the short term, I don't think so. But a lot of this depends on just how things evolve. And I think we're at a very interesting point right now where how everyone's watching each other. Yes. What is everyone else going to do? And again, that's the kind of environment where we have to have a lot of these discussions and make sure we have kind of a coordinated, a shared approach as to how to make this work for people, because that's ultimately what we want.
Yes. Hey, John, talk a bit about, I mean, this is, I've touched on the risk and what's happened the last couple of weeks. Talk about this from a prosperity perspective, which is so important. This is about so much more than risk.
Yeah. I think we need it's either an unlock moment or a fall on the floor moment. We get to decide which one. Is this a rainbow after the storm or is this a disaster? First of all, I want to commend Treasury for leaning in here. I mean, it's the Treasury Department. They're conservative. They don't say anything, do anything unless they have to, and they're here leaning into this topic. I can't underscore that enough. Freedmen's Bank, you also were there when I came to you guys about renaming Treasury Annex to the Freedmen's Bank. I remember the secretary, I said, you should rename this. Well, it's been Treasury Annex Building for 100 years, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, you cannot possibly tell me that the Treasury Annex Building is a sexier name than the Freedmen's Bank Building. So they renamed it in honor of former slaves, put every dollar they had in the bank. But in the state, through your leadership, has leaned into this topic. I don't think people really knew that. Thank you for your leadership there. And Comptroller Sue, I've worked with 8 comptrollers, at least, which regulate 70 cents of every dollar in this country. I've never seen one, and I like most of them. I think they're great people. I've never seen one more courageous than you in doing this conference, not only speaking at it, co-hosting it. I don't think people realize how nobody in Washington wants to do anything unless somebody else, I think somebody just said, unless somebody else does it. And the fact that you leaned into this, I can't thank you enough. It shows how much you and the agency care about the American people. Thank you. And he'd be here, but he's got COVID. Otherwise, he'd be here in person. And we even that wouldn't stop you. And so we thank you for your and wish you a speedy recovery. Look, I didn't want to talk about this thing. Somebody asked me, well, why are you courageous leaning in? I didn't lean into this. I got yanked, pulled, drug into this. I'm busy. I'm dealing with 41% of black folks don't own a home. Only 41% of black folks own a home. We need to get more people. 96% of black businesses don't have an employee. 96% of black businesses don't have an employee. All these systemic issues, COVID, recovery. This is the last thing I wanted to take on, but the market spoke. Yeah. I mean, the majority of black folks and brown folks either in this or want to be in this. When I heard that average African American who's in this think they're going to get a 20% annualized return from this, and that's what they expect. There's a lot of misinformation floating around, and there's a lot of legitimate opportunity. Look, let me see how I frame this really crisply. This thing started in 2008, 2009. Please, those in the audience, remember what happened in 2008, 2009. Please. The whole financial system got shook. You with me? I'm sorry, I'm from the black church. I'm used to seeking response. Are you with me?
Yes.
Okay. So it's in the midst of this crisis, in questions about the financial system and whether it's truly there for you. Some of my friends say, oh, I hate rich people. No, you don't. You hate rich people till you become rich.
Yeah.
That's right.
What you hate is a game system. What you hate is a system that doesn't seem to have rules where you can prosper. And so this perception that things were rigged or somehow only the small guy got bit, that in that backdrop is where this came from. So it's an emotional currency. It was created in an environment of emotions. Here's what I can tell you. Any decision you make emotionally, purely emotionally, is going to be a bad decision. I don't care what it is. Here's the context. I would try to run away from this. My wife invested in crypto, in Bitcoin. Now, let me tell you something about my wife, who is really smart and sitting in the audience. She also owned Amex.com. So before the internet became a thing, she was smart enough, looked around the corner, and like Time Magazine's president, Keith, really smart, and went and purchased the domain name for AmeriExpress.com. Wow. And because the family knew the CEO, they didn't want to get in a lawsuit, she gave it up. She still is upset with her father sitting there that he made her give up AmeriExpress.com. We'd all be chilling on an island somewhere if she just... So this lady who thinks like this and helped her father build the 22nd largest black-owned business in America also invested $1,000 in Bitcoin, which is now worth, I think she told me last week, $40,000. So she's happy as I don't know what. She just bought a condo in the metaverse. I don't know what that was. I don't know how we visited. But, so this is my house.
Yes.
Now, she also has a venture capitalist backer, me, to catch her in case things go sideways. So she's not betting her rent money. Next, you have Tony Ressler, 400th richest man in the world, created Apollo, created Ares Management, owns the Atlanta Hawks, owns a bunch of stuff, F1 team, 400th richest man in America, who said 2 weeks ago at a conference, all the crypto leaders in the audience, if somebody can tell me how the price of this goes up and how the price goes down, I'm happy to buy some. Crickets. Here's the context. We want prosperity, but we need protection. Because those who can afford to lose 5% of their net worth, who are worth a lot of money, investing in some of this, are different from people literally betting their rent money on this as a get-rich-quick scheme. Let me tell you something. There is no easy route to wealth. It's just work. What is love? Work. Whatever you love is going to drive you nuts. You love your kids, you're going to want to divorce them every 2 days. You love your husband or your wife, you love whatever you love. You love your job. Look, you love your job. We drug you to Atlanta. I mean, you thought that you told us a desk job. I mean, whatever you love drives you nuts. It's work. Anybody thinks this is a get-rich-quick scheme and there's going to be no work and there's going to be no risk, you are smoking some very strange herbs. We need to knock it off. This conversation that somehow cryptocurrency and is this panacea, and it is the mecca and the end of government and all this stuff. And by the way, the end of government, the end of fiat currency, what do you think this stuff is riding on? We need to knock it off. Like, we need to have a sober conversation. Let me say something I think is really strange, in addition to everything else I said. I think the way you unlock value on this, listen now, anybody who listens to the audience who thinks I'm not for you, I think that cryptocurrency is part of the future. Digital assets, part of the future. The how is the question. Let me say this. If you want to really unlock value of this, capitalists in the audience, let the government in. I know that sounds really strange. Maybe I just lost all credibility. Listen to the next sentence. What happened when title companies went and had government oversights? Business just took off. What happened when Wall Street had a government oversight? Brokerage firms broadened deep in the marketplace. The value of these companies went through the roof. Let me do a big one. What happened when banks became FDIC insured? I mean, take the FDIC insurance off. People, my friends complain in banking. I hate all these regulations. Fine, remove FDIC insurance. See how that works for you. Nobody concerned because you have FDIC on the wall. Everybody trusted. Are you with me? Yes. The industry just exploded in wealth creation, deposits. So it's a trade-off. We need to know there's guardrails on this thing. If you want market value, asset value, you want this to be trusted, you want broad adoption, let the government in. It doesn't stifle innovation. It doesn't mean you can't be creative. Entrepreneurs need bankers and regulators, and the other is also true. Somebody said to me yesterday, well, we don't need nanny states. What are you talking about? My mother told me, you can't hang out with that little knucklehead boy. You got to be home by midnight. I didn't like what my mother said. I didn't like her for 20 years. But 20 years later, I said, Mom, thank you for letting me not go hang out with that knucklehead. Mm-hmm. So I'd rather you respect me and learn to like me than like me and never respect me. We have got to grow up and understand there's no free lunch. If you want to unlock the real value in this, we need to find a way to live together, work together where 2 + 2 = 6.
So
Can I jump in on and echo some of these points quickly? Because I could not agree more. And as Graham said, some states regulate this well. I think New York is one of them. Other states don't. And to John's point, the good actors in this space want regulation. We have the most stringent regulation in cryptocurrency in New York. And the demand for our licenses, the BIT license and the limited purpose trust charter license that we have, go up and up and up every year, because the good companies know that this regulation, that having the government as part of this, is good for their investors and it's good for consumers. But I will tell you, just because John got me exercised up here, I did a round table with a number of cryptocurrency companies the other day, and there was it's not a very diverse group generally, the entrepreneurs, and there was a venture capitalist white gentleman in there who was telling me this regulation was horrible and I was bad for black people because I was spearheading this regulation.
Wow.
And I told him I was at the Treasury Department working for Secretary Lew when the bank was named. I led the financial services portfolio in the Obama White House. And then I went to the private sector and I actually started and took public a tech company before then coming to this job, having the great honor of being nominated by Governor Hochul. And this man was telling me how I was bad for black people because of the regulation we have in New York. And I think maybe politely, although my team was there, they would have said maybe it wasn't that polite. But I said, I've been a regulator, I've been a policymaker, I've been an entrepreneur. My mother grew up in the housing projects in the Bronx. My father grew up in segregated Baltimore. I've made a good amount of wealth taking a company public, and I understand how regulation is good for the market and is good for consumers. So I think, to John's point, there is a way to build this space responsibly, make sure that it is equitable, and make sure that black and brown people and historically marginalized communities can also participate in the gains when governed responsibly. But to say that there's a group of people that should get rich out of this and then we pull up the ladder after them is a huge mistake.
Yeah.
So as John, as you mentioned, many of these industries have gone through their Wild West period, right, before regulation unlocked value and enabled them to really flourish. What about market stability now? What parts of the crypto world right now threaten market stability? Are there any specific parts, Graham or Mike?
Graham's looking at me like, will you please take that one? I'm not sure Graham can opine on this. Can you?
You take a swing and then I'll...
Well, no, look, I mean, I love to quote Melody Hobson, I like math because it doesn't have an opinion.
Yes.
Here's the math. There were 19,000 coins, crypto coins. 10,000 of them, poof. You hear that? Poof. Just went away with somebody's money. no website, no customer service line. Do you know these things are irreversible? Like, there's no refund desk. There's no oopsie desk. Once it's done, which is cool as long as, it was the right transaction. You have, of the ones that are left, about 20, I'm being liberal here, who have liquidity, where you can buy, sell. It really is, I think, 4 or 5 that have massive liquidity, and one of them just went south of the border last week. We are in a wild west period. That said, Tanya Evans, Professor Tanya Evans, some of you know her. She has a cryptocurrency pillow she sleeps on, and we had a debate with the comptroller a couple weeks ago. Smart lady, brilliant. I was wrong, she was right about this. The world has spoken. They want this as part of their future. Either America finds a way to regulate it and frame it, or some other country is going to be the first mover, and we're going to lose that opportunity. So as much as I'm cautioning here, because people are using their rent money, because there was a whole suicide list on Reddit last week. I was in London. Suicide on this, is it Terra? Because people had lost everything. As much as I'm cautioning about that, the protection piece, I am saying this is a part of the future, and America needs to be leading this, not coming up from the rear. And I want you to, if you're going to tweet the protection I just said, make sure you tweet I said that as well. I'm just saying we need to be responsible about how we do this. And now hopefully that's giving you time to actually think about
Yeah,
what you're
no,
gonna say.
I appreciate that. We have said, the Secretary told Congress last week that we don't think a lot of these digital assets, these markets, these kinds of cryptocurrencies are big enough to bring down the entire financial system yet. They're not necessarily a risk to the stability of the entire financial system or the broader US economy. That said, I've got 2 qualifications there. The first is, we don't want to wait until this industry gets so big that can happen to think about how we want to put guardrails on it and how we weed the responsible actors from the irresponsible actors. So we feel like we got to get out ahead of a bunch of these issues, because we don't want it to get so far down the road, the horses are out of the barn and we don't know where they are and how to collect them and bring them back in. So that's point number 1. Point number 2, I want to go back to what I said at the beginning, which is, just because something's not going to bring down the entire system, just because a single algorithmic stablecoin loses 70% of its value in a week, and that doesn't threaten Wall Street banks or other large financial institutions, doesn't mean there weren't people who didn't lose money on that. And so that is one concern of ours. Are any of these products going to be a major threat to the broader system or people in the economy? But the other is, we don't want people to lose money in those situations. We want them to understand what they're signing up for. We want them to be able to build wealth using these things, not have their wealth wiped out. We want to make things like payments easier for them, not have hidden embedded fees in there, so you think you're going to be able to take your money out and send it to someone else. It turns out, well, not really, unless you want to pay $2,000. So we think the stability piece of it is only one component of this, which is, do people understand this stuff? Are they able to use them in a safe and responsible way? So we're sort of thinking about a number of different sets of issues, not just the stability piece, because we don't think we're there yet.
And by the way, last week I was Mr. Financial Literacy. I was defrauded, not having nothing to do with Bitcoin. I was defrauded on a traditional account. I woke up one day and some dude in wherever, halfway around the world, took $26,000 out of one of my accounts. Well, he started with $25. It was a test. The bank sent me a note, hey, this might be a problem. I said, hey, that's not me. They missed. The next one was a $26,000 pull from my account. And that money was gone, man. It was done. And I was not having a good morning. And the bank said, well, fill us out this affidavit, and yes, you're right, you did warn us, we missed it. And by that afternoon, I had my $26,000 back. Can I get an amen? That don't happen in this world.
Yeah.
Wrong move, it's gone. And it's not coming back. Am I saying we shouldn't have this? I mean, even the Treasury just said prosperity. The word prosperity just came out of his mouth. We want to have prosperity. We need entrepreneurs and innovators to find the next frontier. We also need to make sure that the senior citizen does not lose every dime of her retirement because some snake oil salesman told her she can't lose. That infuriates me. We got to find a balance.
Yeah. Hey, Michael.
Brett, can I?
No, absolutely, please.
So your question about how does the market kind of sort itself here? I think it's one thing that we need to talk about is what do we mean by innovation? Because I hear this all the time from a kind of crypto advocates is that it's innovative, it's innovative, it's innovative, and typically they refer to look at remittances, look at some I think some pretty feel-good places where we can all agree, but in the crypto space, those are really marginal. Like, what is the biggest innovation in DeFi? It's yield farming. Like, what is the purpose of yield? And if yield farming is making you scratch your head, well, that's where that 20% return that attracted so many people, that's where that came from. So when people talk about innovation, I think we really, innovation for whom? For what purpose? And I think this links back to Adrian's point. If that innovation is to actually help with inclusion, to actually help with show me, then I'm on board. Like, let's talk. But I think too often that word gets used in a way that's really to just pump, 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 grow, grow, grow. And I think that's, I think there's some real soul searching that needs to be to take place within the industry to say what exact. And I think people need to call each other out. And I think you're seeing some of that now, but there's that lack of that because it's just been a wave of money is something that really needs to be rethought.
Yes. So, Adrian, what does this entire crypto world look like in 5 years, 10 years?
Yeah. So when I talk to people about crypto, I say, remember, for those who are old enough, remember back when Amazon started and it just sold books. And if you would have said in 10 years, we're going to have AWS, it's going to be running the cloud world, you can get anything you want overnight, or in some cases, same day. It's one of the world's largest small business lenders, which they've kept very quiet. You would have said, but they sell books, right? That's the analogy I use for where crypto and DeFi and distributed ledger is now. For all the innovation we're seeing, and I totally agree with Mike, there's innovation and there's innovation, we're just at the beginning, and I think what we're going to see from this space writ large is very, very hard to predict. And if I had that crystal ball, I'd probably be in a different line of work. I'd be trading more of these assets myself.
Yes. Graham, you want to take a shot at that?
I don't, because it's such a. It has changed so. I mean, to Adrian's point, it has changed so much in just the time that I've been working on these issues over the last 15 years. So I don't know what it's going to look like, and so, as I said in my answer to my previous question to your previous question, we're trying to think about where it's going and get out ahead of some of these issues, but with some of them, it is very hard to think about how you write a law or regulation when you're like, are we going to be using blockchains or are we going to be using something else? Are people going to be using these algorithmic trading functions to try to balance out and determine the value of the stuff, or is it going to be done a different way? And so figuring out a technology neutral way to design some of these things is just really, really hard. I mean, we're going to be able to keep some of the good parts of this stuff. We're going to lose some of the bad ones. But right now, I think we're still trying to figure out which of these different kinds of products, services, and technologies fit into which one of these camps. So that's why it's hard, but we're committed to doing it because we want to really sort through the good actors from the bad ones, because that's how we really move forward in this space.
Yes. Great. Michael, crystal ball?
Yeah, so I'll follow Graham and say, I'll quote Yogi Berra, forecasts a really hard future. So I'm not going to do that. But what I do want to say is there is this theme or meme that crypto is inevitable that I think is very dangerous, because if anything that's inevitable doesn't require engagement, you just step back, let it happen. And I think that's the opposite of what needs to happen right now. I think right now, everyone needs to get in, and we have to shape the value system. Now is the time to shape the value system. What do we want this to do? People complain about different systems not working for the people. We're now in the molding phase. Get in. How do we do that? Because if we don't, it's not, right now, as far as I can tell, like the loudest voices at the table are all backed by venture capital money. they're not for the people. Like, how do we get public interest in there? And I think that that's really important. That's why it's important for policymakers, regulators, Congress, people to get involved. Like, what do you want? What do we want this to do? How do we make it work for us?
It's great. Pivotal time. Pivotal time. Thanks so much to everyone. Thank you, John. Thanks.
You mind if I take a whack at this? before we go?
Absolutely.
Digitization is the future. Period. You sort of leaned into it. I'm just going to say it. What the comptroller just said, though, about culture is everything. Culture is not the most important thing in business. It's the only thing in business. It's also the only thing in your household. It's the only thing on your block. Everything is run by culture. Do you shape it, or is it shaping itself? And you know, during the .com boom, it was so much excitement. I actually myself thought about turning Operation Hope into operationhope.org. Like, I literally thought about renaming the organization. And if anybody who can remember that era, there were a lot of very sober-minded people who thought literally about they just were going to become a .com. I see heads shaking over here. We don't want to admit it now, but that was like really a sober thought. Luckily, I didn't do it. Then what happened? The internet flakiness imploded. What was left was some stable, real companies selling real stuff with a new medium, right? We've matured into a new internet called Internet 2.0. Is the metaverse, not the metaverse, but it rides on it. Is Web 3.0 real? I think it's the future. It's the absolute future. It's a natural progression. But we're gonna need high tech and high touch, not one or the other. What I find is that I'm doing the same thing I did to close big deals I did 30 years ago. Meet with somebody. Come meet with you, look you in the eye, and you decide I'm a good investment. That doesn't change in thousands of years. It's not gonna change. No matter what else, it's about personal relationship capital and the other things that drive true growth. And we need to wrap a culture around this rocket ship before it hurts somebody. And we needed to help somebody, not hurt somebody. So those who care about it need to wrap some comfort and some structure and some guardrails around it to make sure it's here for the future. I do believe this is a large part of the future. I don't think it's going to look like what we're seeing right now. I do not. I think you're going to have to bake it in to the existing structure. Think about what some of these coins are doing. They're adding treasury bills and US currency to the asset base of their coin to illustrate that it's safe and stable. Isn't that what you're running away from? Isn't that what you just said you didn't want? Like, make up your mind. I think that we're gonna find we need each other. Hello, we're better together.
Yes. Hey, look, Adrian's analogy was wonderful. I can remember when we questioned whether or not Amazon could even compete with B. Dalton Books, let alone Barnes & Noble, right? And so it's a terrific analogy. And
I'm waiting for the first big partnership between a big bank and one of these, cryptocurrency platforms. That's going to be fascinating, and I guarantee you it's coming.
Absolutely.
great stuff.
I said it, he didn't.
Yes,
Or him, or
Or her, or him. Thank you so much.
Sound and
absolutely.
fair. Safe,
Thank
sound,
you.
and fair.
Thank you, Michael.